before called Queen Moo and the Egyptian Sphinx. This is written by Augustus Le Plongeon, MD. He did some archaeological work there in the Yucatan. Very scholarly, actually. He did a lot of research. He has a lot of sources in his book. Again, this was written in 1896. Just want to go ahead and read sign here. We're going to continue in this book.
In the appendix are presented for the first time in modern ages the cosmogonic notions of the ancient Mayas, rediscovered by me. They will be found identical with those of the other civilized nations of antiquity. In them are embodied many of the secret doctrines communicated in their initiations to the adepts in India, Chaldea, Egypt, and Samothracia. The origin of the worship of the cross. Okay, again, future video. I'm going to show you where the cross originated. And he just correlated with it. And I didn't know he was going to correlate with that. But again, the origin of the worship of the cross, or the commemorance, or what the cross was, right? Not a worship. Of that of the tree, or the tree of life, and of the serpent, the Khans, plum serpent, introduced in India by the Nagas. Who? The Nagas? This was introduced in India by the Nagas, who raised such a magnificent temple in Cambodia. The Nagas raised a temple in Cambodia. Who are these Nagas? In the city of Angkor Thom, to their god, the seven-headed serpent, the Akshapat of the Mayas. The same god of the Mayas, which is called Akshapat. And afterward carried its worship to Akkad and to Babylon. So what? We're talking about the Nagas? Who was these Nagas? They had brought this serpent knowledge from America, right, to Cambodia, from there to Akkad and to Babylon. So we're seeing a reverse direction. In these cosmogonic notions, we also find the reason why the number 10 was held most sacred by all civilized nations of antiquity, and why the Mayas, who in their scheme of numeration adopted the decimal system, did not reckon by tens but by fives and twenties, and why they used the 20 millionth part of half the meridian as standard of lineal measures. In the following pages, I simply offer to my readers the relation of certain facts I have learned from the sculptures, the monumental inscriptions carved on the walls of the ruined palaces of the Mayas, the record of which is likewise contained in such of their books as have reached us. I venture only such explanations as will make clear their identity with the conceptions on the same subjects of the wise men of India, Chaldea, Egypt, and Greece. All right? I do not ask my readers to accept a priori of my own conclusions, but to follow the sound advice contained in the Indian saying quoted at the beginning of this preface. All right? Verify by experience what you have learned. Then only then form your own opinion.
All right, so we continue in the book The Lost Continent of Moo by Colonel James Churchward, 1931. And I'm on page 113, wanted to read this part to you. More correlation to what we're learning. It says, now I shall try to fix an appropriate date of the Naga colony in India before it became a colonial empire. All right, so a colony. One prominent figure in the Naga or Maya Empire in India. So this Naga Empire is really the Maya Empire in India. It's a colony of the Mayas. So it says that one prominent figure of this Naga or Maya Empire in India was Prince Maya. Yes, Prince Maya. They had a prince. His name was Maya. The time of Prince Maya is doubtful, although I have come across many records about him. Not a single one even estimates the day when he lived, but according to traditions, and these traditions are as plentiful as leaves on a tree, Prince Maya lived 15,000 to 20,000 years ago. In Ramayana, or in the Ramayana, alright, that's a book, an ancient Hindu book of poems or stories or something like that, alright, we find this reference to him. In olden times, there was a prince of the Nagas, whose name was Maya, of the Serpent Kings, of the Nagas. Who's the Serpent Kings again? The Mayas, right? His name was Maya. Prince Maya was the author of the Surya Siddhanta, the Horrius treatise on astronomy in India. Its age has been variously estimated at from 10,000 to 22,000 years. At the time of Prince Maya, the Nagas were an empire. When the handle and shovel of this knife were made, the Nagas were a colony, antedating the empire. That they were only a colony is clearly shown by the suns without rays on the horizon. This proves the extreme antiquity of the handle and the sheath. Alright? And this is what they're talking about, this knife and handle. The Naga Hindu knife, they call it. It is not known when the Naga Empire ended, but they're saying that this is very old, before their empire was established, when they were just colonists coming from America.
So what is the Ramayana? It says the Ramayana is an ancient Indian epic composed sometime in the 5th century BC about the exile and then return of Rama, prince of Ayodhya. Alright, so we're in ancient history encyclopedia. Alright. It was composed in Sanskrit by the sage Valmiki. Alright, so this was written by this guy named Valmiki, who's known as famous sage. Alright, the Ramayana. Valmiki was a great sage and author of the Ramayana. It says Maharsha Valmiki, the author of the great Indian epic Ramayana, was a Hindu sage who lived around the beginning of the first millennium BC. He is referred to as the Adi Kavi, the original creator of the Hindu sloka, a verse form in which most of the great epics such as the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, Puranas, and other works are composed. Alright, he started that. Alright, so just wanted to read this book over here. And we're in the book here. It's called Garden of the Elder Gods by Don Shom. Alright, and just reading right here. There's an overview of such regional centers will commence within Asia, where one of the early academies was evidently located in ancient Burma, modern-day Myanmar. According to the Indian historian Valmiki, alright, here we go, Valmiki, right? An Indian historian who's a real sage, a real historian. Alright, Burma was the first settlement in Asia, with some records supposedly dating its cultural start around 33,000 BC. Alright, they can go that back. Alright, according to them, right? Records from other diverse cultures state that the extensive instruction was dispensed throughout Burma prior to its dispersal into other lands. Such graduates eventually migrated eastward into China and southeastward into Thailand and Cambodia, as well as westward into an uninhabited part of northwest India. Alright, so they're going to tell us what they're talking about when they're talking about these graduates. It says, in those areas, human graduates and a few helpers that accompanied them taught human natives they encountered. Those regional teachers became known as the Nagas. Alright, the Nagas. Certain ancient tablets found in Burma have been directly linked with Naga records found within India. Writings by Valmiki expressly stated, now listen to what Valmiki said, the author of the Ramayana. Alright? Listen to what he stated. It says, the Maya, starting from the land of their birth in the east, right, in America, they went first to Burma and there taught the natives who became known as the people of the Nagas. Alright, you see what's going on here? You see the correlation? The original indigenous culture of India is thought to be that of the Danavans, the Nagas, who were later called the Naakals, and still later became known as the Maya. Alright? They later became known as the Maya, reportedly imparted that culture. It was the Nagas who started this whole Indian or Hindustan or Hindu mythology, culture, history. However, Colonel Churchward claimed that the original or earliest people were actually the Maya. Alright? He taught the right thing, which was the Maya. Perhaps a reference to the ancient ones or the pure-blooded, human-like lunar Petries that comprised the group known as the Helpers. Valmiki further claimed that the Naga came to be called the Maya in certain later settlements. So even these Nagas were called Maya in India. Alright, you hear that? Accounting for the overall confusion of the chronological order of introduction between the Naga, the Navas, Naakals, and Maya. These are probably all the same people. Some records resolve this linguistic dispute by referring to the earliest civilizers as the Naga Maya, the Naga Maya. Alright? There are further indications, although inconclusive, that the Naga Maya may have also been associated with the Mayans of Mesoamerica. All right, they are the Mayans of Mesoamerica. Where else would they get the word from? Ancient records indicate that the original Naga Maya were associated with the Serpent people. The what? Serpent people. Again, we were reading earlier, right, in the book Mysteries of the Mexican Pyramids, right? Origin of the Maya, what did it tell us? Right, the book of Chilambalam related the first inhabitants of Yucatan were the Chanes, people of the serpent. All right, Itzama, serpent of the east. All right, the Chumal book of Chilambalam is even more specific. It speaks of the first inhabitants of Yucatan, known as the Akanule, or people of the serpent. People of the serpent. All right, we go back to Garden of the Elder Gods. All right, the other book we were reading. It says again, ancient records indicate that the original Naga Maya were associated with the serpent people, the Snake Kings, the Nagas. What up, my Naga? The esoteric non-human race of wondrous beings. Esoteric non-human, so they want to make it all mythical, right? That reportedly possessed immense cosmic wisdom. The serpent symbol was one of the ancient icons, specifically referring to the ancient ones. You see, that's you they're talking about, the ancient ones. Hence, the Naga emblem became the serpent or cobra symbol of ancient India, one revered as signifying both great wisdom and immense knowledge. And you find that in Egypt too, right? Now back to what the Ramayana was telling us and what we were reading in the other book, right? It was saying that about Prince Maya, right? It says one of the prominent Naga Empire leaders was the original Prince Maya, right? This is in their Hindu text, Prince Maya, who came from another land, with a later namesake or counterpart also existing during much later times. No written record established a time frame for the original prince, but oral traditions place him as living sometime between 18,000 and 13,000 BC. The Ramayana merely refers to the original Prince Maya as living in the olden times. Original people from the olden times. That original prince is credited as the true source of most of the esoteric knowledge of India. All right, he was a Maya, he was an American, a Naga, right? He passed the knowledge over to the Hindus over there, or the native people over there. All right, passed down over the ages, which was later contained in the Surya Siddhanta. All right, all that he taught, Prince Maya, was written right there in that book.
Before called Queen Moo and the Egyptian Sphinx. This is written by Augustus Le Plongeon.
Perhaps also will be felt the necessity of recovering the libraries of the Maya sages, hidden about the beginning of the Christian era, to save them from destruction at the hands of the devastating hordes that invaded their country in those times, and to learn from their contents the wisdom of those ancient philosophers, of which that preserved in the books of the Brahmins is but the reflection. You hear that? So all these books of the Brahmins in Hindustan is just a reflection of the old knowledge of the Mayas. And to learn from their contents the wisdom of those ancient philosophers, of which that preserved in the books of the Brahmins is but the reflection. Alright, so these books of the Brahmins in Hindustan or India is just a reflection of the Maya history or stories or knowledge. Alright, that wisdom was no doubt brought to India. Again, that wisdom was no doubt brought to India, and from there carried to Babylon and Egypt. So it went from America to India, and his, based on what he's reading, to Babylon and Egypt. In very remote ages by those Maya adepts, Naacal, the exalted, who starting from the land of their birth as missionaries of religion and civilization went to Burma, where they became known as the Nagas, demonizing serpents, right? But we're talking about the Snake Kings, the Khans, the Nagas, the Mayas, the Plum Serpent, the Khans, Priest Kings. We're talking about the Dragon Kings, right? Not all snakes are bad, just like not all angels are good. Thanks to King Drop for that drop. Alright? So again, they went to Burma, the Maya, where they became known as the Nagas, and they established themselves in the Deccan, whence they carried their civilizing work all over the earth.
Mysteries of the Mexican Pyramids, again by Peter Tompkins.
All right, so now we're on part 25. It's called Prehistoric Mexico. All right, and I want to read this part. We read from a book a little bit, Moo, The Lost Continent. That was written by James Churchward. I want to read a little bit of the story behind that book, though. All right, so it's in this book, Mysteries of the Mexican Pyramids. So it says, one indication that a far earlier civilization existed in the Valley of Mexico than was reached by Manuel Gamio's spades comes from the tantalizing discoveries made in the Mexican highlands by a Scotsman, William Niven. As a mining engineer working for a Mexican corporation, Niven described coming upon the remains of two separate prehistoric civilizations at depths from 6 to 30 feet below the present level of the Valley of Mexico. All right, he found a whole city, town, ruins 30 feet below the Valley of Mexico. All right, that's how far he found it. That's how deep. So dig on William Niven. All right. These discoveries made between 1910 and 1930 have hardly been considered by the scientific world, partly because they fit into none of the preconceived notions. All right, it doesn't fit into their out of Africa or theories and all that stuff, right? Mesopotamia and all that. And partly because they were used by an even more unorthodox author, James Churchward. All right, so it seems that this author, James Churchward, somehow knew William Niven, got the info, and wrote his own book about it. All right, what this guy found, William Niven, but based on what he believed, his beliefs. All right, so it says he used it to validate to the orthodox scientists, his even wilder hypothesis, the existence of a vast continent in the Pacific Ocean, which he called Moo, mother, says he, of several colonial civilizations which spread around the globe. All right, so real quick, this is what they're talking about that James Churchward wrote, which is The Lost Continent of Moo, which we read a little bit earlier. Fantastic but true, the scientific mythical discovery of a strange civilization that disappeared 50,000 years ago. Intensely interesting. All right, so James Churchward, right? So this is the book, but he got a lot of his studies from. All right, so it says here, dedicated to my friend William Niven. So I guess that was his friend, suppose, by whose help and discoveries I have been able to bring to fruition this work. So you see, he wouldn't have been able to write this book if William Niven hadn't made that discovery and shared the info with him somehow. So it says preface. All matters of science in this work are based on the translations of two sets of ancient tablets. Naacal tablets, which we already know are the Nagas, which are the Mayas, right? Which I discovered in India many years ago, and a large collection of stone tablets, over 2,500, recently discovered by William Niven in Mexico. So he used the Nagas tablets or the ancient Mayas tablets, and he used other ancient people of Mexico or aboriginal, tablets that were found in Mexico. So, he's using all our work, all our history, basically. Both sets have the same origin. You heard that? Both sets have the same origin. Both sets are extracts from the sacred inspired writings of Moo, what he calls Moo, right? Moo is Lemuria, Atlantis, America. It's all this place. It was here, not all of it sent. The Naacal tablets are written with the Naga symbols and characters, and legend says were written in the motherland and first brought to Burma and then to India. Their extreme age is attested to by the fact that history says the Naakals left Burma more than 15,000 years ago. All right, so now you see how James Churchward is saying that these tablets, these Naga symbols, were first brought from the motherland. We just read before, right, what Valmiki told us, right? Valmiki, let's go back. Again, in the Garden of the Elder Gods book we just read, right? What did Valmiki tell us specifically? That the Maya, starting from the land of their birth in the east, which was America, right? The Maya went first to Burma and there taught the natives who became known as the people of the Nagas, all right? So it was the Maya, it wasn't no Moo, all right? So let's go back to what, so James Churchward is taking the narrative, right? And he's not giving credit to Valmiki. He's straight up saying that the Naga symbols, right, were written in the motherland or the place of birth we got in the other book, right, which was the east with the Maya, right? That was the motherland and first brought to Burma, then to India. So when they're talking about motherland, Moo, dodge the hijack. Talking about true birth of the Maya, the land of the Maya, which is America. It says, where the Mexican tablets were written is problematical. They are mostly written in the northern or Igor symbols and characters. What actual writing there is on both sets is in the alphabet of Moo, motherland. Whether they were written in Mexico or in the motherland and brought to Mexico, I cannot say. You see, he doesn't know whether they were written in the motherland. What motherland? He keeps saying Moo. It's an imagination place for him. But, you know, we know Moo is part of an ancient land or that was connected to America. It had something to do with also the original people that were coming out of America, right? But he's telling you straight up here, he doesn't know whether it was in Mexico or the motherland. He can't say, all right? They are, however, over 12,000 years old, as shown by some of the tablets. All right, so that's just the story I wanted you to, you know, if you get into this book, it's really good because it goes into what he found. But let's go back to Mysteries of the Mexican Pyramids that they were talking about, James Churchward and William Niven's story. So it says, Churchward's efforts, though very popular with aficionados of Atlantean and Lemurian tales, and often prophetically exact in certain details, have, because of Churchward's unsupported and highly improbable notions, he doesn't have, you know, supported evidence, been thrown out by an establishment which may have discarded, along with Churchward's Lemurian bathwater, some living, screaming babies. So you hear that? So even though he was making some of it up or just trying to fit his narrative, he was getting a lot of true information, a lot of real historic, archaeological, real scientific research that Wlilliam was finding. And because of his crazy, that wasn't fitting with what the establishment wanted at that time, they were throwing out babies. The babies were screaming, saying there was information here that we could have used. So all that got lost because of his wild theories, supposedly. So being befriended by his fellow Freemason, Churchward was of no greater help to William Niven. So he was a Freemason, you see that? And he took William's work and he made his own book. He probably made millions of that during that time for writing that book, Moo. All right, so he didn't help William Niven at all. Then it had been to Le Plongeon. So he didn't help Le Plongeon because we're gonna get into his book, and William Niven. He didn't help either of them, Churchward, except that with the thousands of copies Churchward's book sold around the world, Niven was rescued from oblivion. So we wouldn't even know about Niven, William, right? If at least Churchward wouldn't have wrote about him. So at least he did something so we can remember what happened here. When he died in 1937, his obit in the American Historical Review listed him merely as a professor who had been engaged for several years in mineralogical research, an honorary life member of the American Museum of Natural History, and various other such scientific societies who had become involved in Mexican archaeology, nothing more. Nothing to indicate he might have made the most controversial archaeological discovery of the Western world. All right, so his work, what he found in 1910s, 1930s, William Niven in Mexico, which James Churchward took and made a book called Moo, The Lost Continent, even though this stuff was found in Mexico. I want you to understand that. All right. His work is not known. He's not known in our textbooks. We don't know nothing about this guy. All right. It was on purpose. He found something very controversial. Actually, Niven had been exploring in Mexico since 1889. While digging among the ancient ruined cities in the unknown and uninhabited portion of the state of Guerrero, southwest of Mexico City in the Acapulco area, he began to receive periodic visits from local Indians who came to him with terracotta figurines and other objects for sale. Though the Indians pretended to have found these objects at the Pyramid of the Sun and Moon at San Juan Teotihuacan, Niven realized that the source of the artifacts must be nearer. With a bribe of 5 pesos, which is $2.50 at that time, he managed to discover the actual spot. Between Texcoco and Huajalhuepantla, hamlets just north of Mexico City, he came across hundreds, if not thousands, of pits dug into the sand, clay, and tepetate, used for material by builders of Mexico City for more than 300 years. Exploring these pits, which Niven says cover an area of about 10 by 20 miles in the northwest corner of the Valley of Mexico, he came across vast layers of what appeared to be very ancient ruins, whole prehistoric cities lying as deep as 30 feet below the plain, which appeared to have been overwhelmed by a series of cataclysmic tidal waves. All right, you hear what's going on here? They found what he found. He found ruins buried 30 feet below the ground. Obvious something happened there, right? Cataclysm, all right? perhaps at several thousand-year intervals, which, as Niven described them, had left telltale strata of boulders, sand, and pebbles by their depth beneath the surface. Niven estimated the oldest remains might go as far back as 50,000 years. Alright, now remember, in the past videos and the other parts of this series, we got Graham Hancock telling us they've been hiding 100,000 years of history here in America. There's proof of 100,000 years of occupation in the Amazon. All right, so what are we, what's going on here, right? What are we really finding out? This is the true old world, right? Look at everything that they've hidden from us. 4 to 6 feet below the first pavement, even says he encountered a second concrete floor, but in the intervening space failed to find a single piece of pottery or other trace to indicate that humans had once lived here. Beneath the second pavement, he describes coming upon what he considered the great find of many, many years' work in Mexican archaeology. Niven discerned beneath a well-defined layer of ashes from 2 to 3 feet thick, analyzed as being of volcanic origin, traces of innumerable buildings, large but regular in size, the remains of a vast city which appeared uniformly at the same level throughout more than 100 clay pits. In one of the houses, most of which were crushed and ruined, filled with ashes and debris, he says he found an arched wooden door which had turned to stone. The walls of this house were bound together with white cement, harder than stone itself. In one uncrushed room, about 30 feet square, full of volcanic ash, with a flat roof of concrete and stone, Niven says he came across many artifacts and human bones, which crumbled to the touch like a slaked lime.
According to his detailed report, a complete goldsmith's outfit was still on the floor with some 200 models of figures and idols modeled in clay turned to stone, each model thickly coated with iron oxide, bright and yellow, presumably there to prevent the molten metals adhering to the patterns while in the casting pot. Niven says the ornaments were unlike any found in Palenque or Mitla or anywhere between. The work was fine, beautifully polished, demonstrating an advanced degree of civilization. On the walls, Niven found paintings in red, blue, yellow, green, and black, which he says compared favorably with the best he had seen from Greek, Etruscan, or Egyptian works of a similar sort. The ground color of the wall was a pale blue, 6 inches down from the 14-foot ceiling. A frieze painted in dark red and black ran around the room, glazed with some native wax, which had perfectly preserved the color and pattern, which depicted the life of some person, apparently a shepherd from birth to death. Continuing the book, it says, then in 1921, we're still talking about William Niven and his discovery there in Mexico. In the course of excavations at Santiago Ahuizotla, a hamlet contiguous to Amantla, about 5 miles northwest of Mexico City, Niven came across a discovery so startling, he says it opened up for him a whole new field of archaeological research. At a depth of 12 feet, Niven described coming across the first of a series of stone tablets with very unusual pictographs, systematically exploring other clay pits and tepetate quarries within an area of 20 square miles. He claimed he was able to unearth during the course of the next 2 years 975 more tablets. In the end, he says he found more than 2,600, though there was nothing in these tablets by which he could determine their exact or even approximate age. Niven deduced from the depth of which they were buried and the accumulation of debris on top of them that they were over 12,000 years old and more likely closer to 50,000 years old. I just want to show you, all right, the picture of these artifacts that he found, these tablets. All right, he found so many. It says Niven showcase number 6 containing a portion of his collection of carved stones from the Valley of Mexico. When William Niven died in Austin, Texas in 1937, the New York Times described him as a distinguished mineralogist and archaeologist who had discovered buried prehistoric cities beneath the Valley of Mexico. He was also noted as the discoverer of 4 new minerals, including citralite, torogon, and nivenite. According to the Times, Niven donated to the Mexican government the best of the relics he found in Mexico, keeping for himself some which he sold to finance further archaeological expeditions. With what was left over, there were enough pieces to establish in Mexico City a private museum of 30,000 exhibits. You hear this? How come we don't know about this? All right. All right, so I just wanted to go back to an illustration that was here in the book that I didn't show you guys. So I guess this is the depth of what he found, the ruins, the buried city. All right, so it tells you, I guess this will be the top, right, the land level. And then it says here 1 foot of earth. And then right here it says 9 feet of boulders, gravel, sand, drogues, pottery. Then it says first pavement, 6 feet of small boulders, gravel and sand. Then it says second pavement. All right, and then it says 14 feet of small boulders, gravel, sand. Then right here it says volcanic ashes, and then it says buried city, the third pavement. Niven's Mexican buried cities, now 7,000 feet above level of sea. Mountains 5,000 feet higher, intervening. In the several strata clearly revealed by the pits, Niven says he found traces of what he describes as 3 well-preserved concrete floors or pavements at depths from above 6 to 25 feet. Above the first pavement, there was a deposit of small boulders, pebbles, and sands covered with a foot-thick coating of rich valley soil. Everywhere in the first layer of debris, Niven found fragments of broken pottery, small clay figures, diorite beads, spears and arrowheads, spindle whorls, and other artifacts mostly broken. All right, so this is the depth. You see how deep he found this? This was buried under a cataclysm. All right. All right, and we're back in the book just real quick. The Lost Continent of Moo by James Churchward. Just a little closing statement from him. So again, James Churchward, he said he found some tablets called the Naacal tablets in India, right? Which we know the Naacals are just the Nagas, which are the Mayas, right? And also he used the tablets that William Niven found, right, in his discovery here in Mexico. Right, so it says the Naacal tablets, which I came across in the Orient, were only fragments of the various subjects with many missing links. The Mexican tablets not only confirm the Naacal, but supply many of the missing links. Wow, the Mexican tablets helped them supply the missing links. I spent many years proving as far as possible by experimentation that the facts set forth in these tablets were true. I spent over 50 years in investigation, research, and explorations to prove out what I found written on these intensely interesting Naacal tablets. I have yet to find the first one that is wrong. The Mexican, like the Naacal, indubitably establishes to my own satisfaction that at one time the earth had an incalculably ancient civilization, which was in many respects superior to our own, and far in advance of us in some important essentials which the modern world is just beginning to have cognizance of. These tablets with other ancient records bear witness to the amazing fact that the civilizations of India, Babylonia, Persia, Egypt, and Yucatan were but the dying embers of the first great civilization. The Oriental Naacal tablets, which formed the foundation of the first edition of this book, were a wonderful history of past man. Niven's Mexican stone tablets are equally wonderful and instructive, if not more so. If not more, it is more so, because the original. They confirm my contention that the oldest records of man are not to be found in Egypt. All right, not to be found in Egypt or the valley of the Euphrates. They're talking about over there in Iraq and Mesopotamia. But right here in North America. And in the Orient where Moo planted her first colonies. So he's letting you know subliminally, right? Where can you find the oldest records of man? In North America. And then he says it was passed on from there to India via Moo, he says. But he's letting you know straight up, North America. If you want to study, do real research of the cradle of humans, where we came from, our origin stories, our whole history, how we got civilized, you're going to find that here in North America. All right?
Wow.
The history that has been erased in our nation, and in particular with the Native Americans, happened because it didn't fit the story they created, Manifest Destiny. It only works when Indians were savages, and they had to have savages for commerce and government to expand. The ancient artifacts prove otherwise. Why aren't we looking into those? Peter.